It would be impossible to understate the intense focus that John Williams uses when he writes these melodies. And throughout the score to Star Wars, John Williams invented many melodies for each of the different characters, and he interweaves the melodies into the soundtrack as the story unfolds. This idea of pairing a melody to a character is called a leitmotif, and it's the reason that you know Darth Vader is coming even before you see him on screen. And these leitmotifs are used all over the score, like this one for the Rebel fanfare. Williams even treated the Force as its own character with its own theme. Here's one for Leia. But of course, the most iconic leitmotif in all of Star Wars is this one. It's the Imperial March for Darth Vader. The melody of the Imperial March outlines an E-flat major triad, but it strongly emphasizes a G-flat, which makes this kind of a conflict between E-flat major and E-flat minor. The major versus minor directly parallels the prominent darkness of the Darth Vader character and the lightness within him. That's the story of the trilogy, right? Is the darkness coming through to the lightness. And John Williams bakes this conflict right into the melody. It's as if the melody is part of the character itself. And it's a fanfare. It's played boldly in the brass over a marching cadence in the drums and the low strings. It's the sound of dictatorship. It's a leader on a power trip. It so perfectly sets the tone for a dark lord sitting on the throne of his evil empire. While the melody of this march clearly outlines an E-flat major triad, the harmony underneath it is not E-flat major. We're clearly not anywhere near major territory here. The rhythmic cadence underneath, which is outlined by the drums and the low strings, is alternating between G minor and E-flat minor, and this acts kind of like a pedal point underneath the melody. The melody ramps up, introducing these aggressive octave leaps, and we move temporarily to C-sharp minor before coming back to our G minor, E-flat minor home base. The brass build this up bigger and bigger until we get to a moment that feels like the climax, and just when you get there, the brass ceases to play, and it leaves the woodwinds underneath it playing a variation of this theme. And they're outlining dissonance through diminished chords. As the woodwinds finish their phrase, the strings come in mimicking them, but they moved it up a half step, and they're building us up yet another half step into the key of A minor, where the French horns take over the melody. These modulations by half steps have created an upward momentum. We now expect the key to continue rising, and John Williams does not disappoint with this. As we get back to the section of the melody with the aggressive octave leaps, he brings it up yet another half step, and now we're in B flat minor. And just at the conclusion of the melodic phrase, our rhythmic cadence comes back, this time with the drums and the low brass double tonguing, but they've moved it up again another half step into B minor. And then again, the rhythmic cadence moves up another half step. We've clearly set the momentum that we're going to continue this pattern going up by half steps, except that we don't. And right when the melody comes back in, Williams takes us back to G minor. There's no prep, no cadence, nothing, just snap right back into G minor. The trumpets and trombones are now playing the melody in unison. The woodwinds are playing these flurry of scales and arpeggios over top of it. This is about as big as you can imagine this orchestra getting. And now, finally reaching the epic climax of the piece, Williams changes the drum cadence. Up to this point, the cadence has been squarely on the beat, as if to keep his army marching in step with him. But But now the melody takes the forefront, strong and on the beat, and the rhythmic cadence switches to off the beat, as if it's accompanying the melody. To me, this signals like the arrival of the army. The marching has stopped, we've reached our destination. And as we prep for the end of the piece, Williams plunges us into complete chaos. The trumpet's blaring the melody, but the trombones have been given this gnarly chromatic line underneath it. The tension is just building and building. The woodwinds are playing G minor to C harmonic minor, and it keeps building and building, and we're being twisted into agony, until finally it releases over this rhythmic cadence that's driven home, punctuated by the timpani. God, I love this piece of music. This whole soundtrack to Star Wars is clearly influenced by the great classical composers. Famously, this Imperial March was inspired by Mars, the Bringer of War from the Planets by Holst. In fact, they even used Mars as a stand-in for the soundtrack during the production runs. I also hear the influence of Wagner. There are moments in this soundtrack that sound very much like something you would hear in the Ring Cycle. And there are a few passages in this soundtrack that sound like they're literally lifted from The Rite of Spring by Stravinsky. And so I have a question for you. Do you think there is any theme more prominent or more important in all of movie history than the Imperial March in Star Wars? There are definitely some contenders, and I would put several other John Williams scores up against this one, but I don't know if I can crown any of those higher than the Imperial March in Star Wars. And since you liked this video, I've got another one for you to watch. I think you'll really like this one where I recreated the soundtrack to Interstellar as a 24-hour challenge for my wife.